Alright, y'all, this is the Unit 2 test review. Alright, so here we go. Number 1. In the conditional statement, if an angle is obtuse, then it has a measure greater than 90 degrees. The conclusion is, so your conclusion is going to be the second part of your sentence. Okay, but it's not going to include the then. So if an angle is obtuse, it has a measure greater than 90 degrees. The conclusion is the second part, but without the then, which means it is just, it has a measure greater than 90 degrees. Number 2, which of the following is the converse? So the converse is when you flip the sentence around. So instead of you hire a tutor, then you must pay them, it would be if you have to pay for a tutor, then you must have hired them. So that would be A. Number 3, which of the following is the inverse? So the inverse is when you put not in the sentence. You keep the sentence in the same order, you just add not. So this would be if a triangle is not right, then it does not have one angle that is 90 degrees, which is C. Number 4, which of the following is the contrapositive of the given conditional? So it says if a triangle is equilateral, then it has 3 congruent sides. Contrapositive is when you flip the sentence around and you add the not. So we need to do everything to this. So it should say if a triangle does not have 3 congruent sides, then it is not equilateral, which is C. Number 5 and 6, this says these are true or false. Decide if the given conditional is true or false. If it's false, provide a counterexample. You may use words or draw a picture. So number 5 says if 2 lines do not intersect, then they are parallel. Okay, well yes, they could be parallel, but they could also be something called skew. So I'm going to say false because my counterexample is they could be skew lines. We don't talk about that word in algebra, but we do talk about that word in geometry. Number 6, if 2 angles are complementary, so they add up to 90, then they form a right angle. So if 2 angles are complementary, then they form a right angle, and this would be true. No, sorry, wrong. This would be false. I don't know why I just said true. This is false. Okay, you could have 2 angles. You could have a 45 and a 45 here that are 90 degrees, but they don't form a right angle. 7 and 8, determine if this situation described uses inductive or deductive reasoning. So inductive has to do with patterns, and deductive has to do with facts. Okay, so number 7, all cats have a keen sense of smell. Fluffy is a cat, so Fluffy has a keen sense of smell. Okay, so does this mean, because all cats have a keen sense of smell, Fluffy is a cat, so Fluffy has a keen sense of smell, this is based off of the fact that all cats have a keen sense of smell. Because it's based off of facts, that means it's deductive reasoning. Number 8, Michael just moved here from Chicago. Michael has red hair, therefore people from Chicago have red hair. So they're making this statement based off of a pattern that happened, which means that this is inductive reasoning. Number 9, this is where we're going to do a logic. It'll also look exactly like this. So here we've got 5 people. We've got Mr. Brown, Mrs. Young, Mrs. White, Mr. Jones, and Mrs. Long. Okay, and they're all wearing different colors. So they're wearing blue, green, white, yellow, and red. Okay, so I'm going to use these different clues to figure out what color each person is wearing. So neither Mrs. Young nor Mrs. Long is wearing red. So Mrs. Young is not wearing red, so I'm going to put an X there, and Mrs. Long is not wearing red. I'm going to put an X there. The second dot says Mr. Brown and Mr. Jones sometimes go to the movies with the lady in the yellow shirt. So a couple of things we know here. We know Brown and Jones are not yellow because they are with the yellow. And it also says that it's a lady in the yellow shirt. Okay? So this is Mr. Brown, Mrs. Young, Mrs. White, Mr. Jones, and Mrs. Long. Okay, we already know that it has to be a lady wearing yellow, and I already have the two misters marked out there, so I'm good there. The third one says the white shirt is worn by the person with the color as her last name. Okay, so white, we'll have to look for the color as her last name, so that's Mrs. White. So White is wearing white. Okay, so now that I know that, I'm going to put the circle, and then I'm going to X out everything else that's in line with that circle. The fourth dot says, Mr. Brown will not wear green or blue. So brown, I know, is not green or blue. Now you can see I have 4 X's, so I know that Brown, Mr. Brown is wearing red. You can go ahead and fill that in. The fifth dot says none of the ladies are wearing blue. Okay, so Mrs. Young is not wearing blue. Mrs. Long is not wearing blue, which means Mr. Jones is wearing blue. And the last one says Mrs. Young is wearing a color with the same number of letters as her last name. So Young has 5 letters, which means she must be with green. So Mr. Brown is wearing red. Mrs. Young is wearing green. Mrs. White is wearing white. Mr. Jones is wearing blue. And Mrs. Long is wearing yellow. Number 10, how many non-overlapping rectangles make up the 5th figure in the series? So this is just a pattern. So I'm going to count. There's 1 in here. There's 2. There's 4. So you need to figure out the pattern. You can see that they're all being multiplied by 2. So in the 4th figure, that means there would be 8. In the 5th figure, that means there would be 16. The next one says, list the next 2 terms in the pattern. So a number 11, I can see it's going down by 4. Make sure you complete the pattern because the pattern may be changing. It may not be going down 4 the whole way, but this one is. So now I need to subtract 4 again. So 5 minus 4 is 1. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Number 12, it looks like the pattern is that this is being divided by 2 to get the next number. So here, 12 divided by 2 would be 6. 6 divided by 2 would be 3. Number 13, state the property used to draw each conclusion. So number 13, you can see that we would have to divide both sides by 4. So that's going to be division. Number 14, x minus 9 equals 30. We would have to add 9 to both sides. So that would be addition. 15, 16, and 17 says to name the property that justifies each statement. So number 15, you can see that this 2 was distributive. Okay, so that's distributive property. And number 16, if CD equals EF and EF equals GH, then I also know CD equals GH. That's transitive. And then 17 for AB, AB equals AB. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you see the exact same thing. So that is reflexive. Number 18, we're going to complete this proof. So it says 3x plus 2 equals 20. That's a given. Now it's like I need to start working this out. So if I were to start working this out, I would subtract 2. That would get me 3x equals 18. And I did that by subtraction. The next thing I would do is divide by 3, and that would get me x equals 6. And I did that by division. Number 19, which equation best describes the relationship between x and y? A couple different ways you could do this. These are all in y equals. So if you wanted to type those in your y equals and check the table, you could do that. Or you can just see what the pattern is from your answer choices. So if I look at answer A, if I were to do negative 3 times 1, that would be negative 3, plus 5 would be 2. Okay, so that's not it. B says negative 5 times x, so that'd be negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, minus 7 is negative 12. Let's check it for this next one. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10, minus 7 is negative 17. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15, minus 7 is negative 22. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, minus 7 is negative 27. So my answer here is B. 20 and 21, these are always sometimes and never questions. So two angles that are adjacent are blank congruent. So yes, could adjacent angles be congruent? Yes, but they don't have to be. So that one is sometimes. 21, a linear pair is blank supplementary. Okay, well it's linear, so that means it is always supplementary. 22 says 3 non-collinear points, they determine a plane. And 2 points determine a line. Okay, this last problem here, there's something you're going to have to know to be able to start working this out, okay? Yes, I know that these two vertical angles equal each other, but I'm not going to be able to find x or y if I set those equal to each other because I still have two variables. So what you have to notice here is that these two angles make a linear pair, so you can add those up to be 180. So if I add those, that would be 5x minus 15 equals 180. Now I'll add 15 to both sides. So 5x equals 195. And if you do 195 divided by 5, you get x as 39. Okay, now I'm going to take that 39 and I'm going to plug it in for this x right here in this bottom angle. So 3 times 39 plus 5 is 122. Okay, so that means this other angle in 122, those are going to add up to be 180, which means this angle needs to equal 58. So now I'm going to set 2y plus 4 equal to 58. So I have 2y equals, if I subtract 4 from both sides, that gives me 54. And now if I divide by 2, that gets me 27.